Hey everybody, and welcome back to Moda with Ellery, and in this episode we're going to have a look at displacement. And there was a question asked on the forums and on Facebook about creating some like architectural fins that had the front face, so if you look at like this cube, like the front face displaced, but nothing along the sides displaced. And I was going to just make a really fast video just demonstrating the simple technique of how to do that. But I've seen a lot of other questions in a lot of other locations about questions on displacement, so I decided it would be better to make something where we actually look a little bit more in depth at displacement and how we can use it in the modeling process. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at kind of the basics of displacement, and then also look at how we could use the basic idea here to create something like something where just the front face is displaced, how these displacements are going to work along with subdivision surfaces. In some cases we'll want to use them with subdivision surfaces. In some cases we'll want to not use subds and just do straight polygons, and it's going to depend greatly on really what you're looking for, and then just in general how your scene is going to be working. There are going to be some times that we can just use very simple kind of tricks and techniques to make displacements work very easily without having to go through a lot of this stuff, and it's just going to depend on how you set up your scene. All right, so let's start here just looking at this cube, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply a material to it. So I'm just going to press M here. Oops, I got that off screen, and we'll call this cube. All right, and then I'm going to hop right over to the render tab, so we can look and see how this is going to come out. So I'm going to switch down here to my default shading and turn on my preview render, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by adding on a material. So let's go in to Enhanced Modo Textures. I'm going to go to Noise, and let's use what sounds like a good one. Let's use Scuffed. I like Scuffed because this has some nice variation depending on the side that you're on. So it can be real flat on these sides, and then it's real different on there. And so we can just see how this is going to affect the actual displacement. So I'm going to right click here and go down to surface shading and turn on displacement. And now when we're dealing with straight polygons and displacement, the big thing that you're going to initially notice is that we get this tearing away from the edges, so that the polygons really don't look like polygons anymore. So we can see here, if we're looking at any individual flat face, it works great. Works pretty much like you would expect it to. But when you get to these corners, that's where this is problematic. Now you can do something like, here, let's just zoom out here and change the bottom to just our perspective. And let's say we just take the rest of it and we'll put a new material on it. We'll just call flat. You can see this is going to give us, this nice flat sides and top and bottom, but the problem is we still get this tear away effect here at the edges wherever we have anything greater than 0 essentially running in our displacement map. And that's going to cause this separation, which is, ugly and not what we're looking for. So, we have a few options of things we could do with this. Now, you can try experimenting around with the values set here. So, there's foreground and background values for our displacement. Initially, these are going to be set from 0 to 100. Now, sometimes you may have luck with doing something like going from -50 to 50. But in this kind of case, this isn't going to work, and it actually may cause some more issues, because even though it's going to hide the issue wherever we have anything less than the amount, it's going to just give us another issue here where we'll end up with these overlapping parts at the edge. And you can actually see this more clearly if I set this down to -100 to 0, so basically just cutting inwards on the displacement. And what's going to happen is that we're just going to end up with a flat face here, and so this is going to come all the way up to the full edge, and then it's going to cut in. All right, so again, not quite what we're looking for. So the real question and the real issue here is going to be, how does this surface actually work with the displacement? So let's go ahead and set this back to 0 to 100 again, just the default. And I'm going to just grab the whole cube once again and apply the cube material so that we have everything in the same material again. So if we go ahead and subdivide this, so let's just go ahead and press Shift-Tab and turn on subdivision surfaces, notice that we end up with, no breaks here. Now, in this kind of a case, because of the way this is mapped, we will get some separation between the sides to the top just a little bit here. And also I have draft displacement turned on, so it's not going to look really super perfect. Now, one thing we can do to help lessen this is to increase the subdivision level. So let's go ahead to mesh here, or rather to surface. And I'm going to change my subdivision level to 4. Actually, let's go to 5. And my render level to 5 also. And this is going to smooth out our subdivision even more. So the end result will be that there is going to be more and more separation in between the individual faces, and there's going to be less and less of a sharp angle between the individual faces. So remember, with each subdivision, all we're doing is taking every 4-sided poly and turning it into 4 4-sided polygons, and then kind of smoothing out from there. So going up to a subdivision level of 5, we then have a pretty smooth surface. So, if I turn off the displacement entirely, and you see the surface is pretty smooth. So this is going to alleviate some of the problems, but now the issue is we're looking at a sphere instead of a cube, so this really isn't helping us out in the long run. This does, however, give us a hint as to how we can alleviate this problem. So the main issue that we're having is that, the displacement is based off of the angle of incidence of any individual polygon, or in the case of subdivision surfaces, of the implied polygon. So it's based off of the surface normal. So the displacement is always going to go in the direction that the polygon, or the implied polygon in this case, is facing. So if we take and add some extra edges here, so I'm just going to, oops, you have to bear with me, my mouse button is going out, so occasionally I will get a misfired click here. So just bear with me if my selections deselect themselves. And here, let me go ahead and pause the rendering so that we can work a little bit more quickly. So let's go ahead and pause that. And then let's run another loop slice this direction, and then a loop slice that direction. So now we've got, we're back to a cube, and let's go ahead and unpause this, and we're going to have most of the problem alleviated because we no longer have completely sharp corners. Now, the downside of this is that this still isn't going to work if we only want the faces to go in one direction, and we'll see why here in just a second. Let me just leave this just a moment for it to calculate. There we go. Now it's rendering again. So, so the problem, like I said, this will not alleviate the issue that we're having with like the fins here. So, what I'm going to do, I still have all of the sides selected here. So let me go ahead and include the back here and select that. And then I'm going to apply our alternate texture here, the flat one, and we'll click OK. And you'll see that we get something has gone wrong, and it really just kind of has blown the surface up here. So this is not at all what we want. So you can oftentimes end up with some really weird artifacts if you do this. So so this isn't going to give us the best solution, and the main reason for that is that we're left with these rounded corners that are kind of facing upwards. So you can still see here, even through the error that I've got going on, you can still see that part of this is not projecting forward, but projecting up to a 45-degree angle, because we're leading up to this rounded edge. And that rounded edge, remember, we're basing the displacement off of the implied surface angle here that the subdivision surfaces are creating. So, it's going to go from straight here, then it's going to round up to 45 degrees and face up there. So it's not going to give us the feeling of a good flat projection. Now, this is also going to do it on the sides, so not just on the top and bottom, but on the sides. So it's going to kind of spray out 45 degrees in every direction on the corners, and that's really going to kill the effect if we just want a forward-facing displacement. So really the issue here is that we need to find a way of separating out the front face from the rest of the model without causing it to have any rounding going on. Now, if we do this with subdivision surfaces, it's going to be difficult because subdivision surfaces, by their nature, are going to tend to pull things away from the corners. We're going to use a weight map in order to contain the actual displacement, but if we put a weight map just on, say, these 4 vertices right here, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and we put 100% here and 0% everywhere else, you can see that there's going to be a relatively large fade out distance. Now we could add in some more subdivisions and more and tighten up these edges a lot more. But in this case, the subdivision surfaces are actually hurting us because they're, by nature pulling things away from the corners where we want something to be very, very tight so it's very close to the edges. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually just select this entire cube and get rid of it. And let's go over to the model tab here, and I'm going to create a new one. And now what we can do is we can create a weight map that will just contain this front face, but we want it to fade at the edges. Because if we look here, let's turn on our weight map mode, and let's make a new weight map, and we'll call this disp for displacement. You can see that with 100% put here, it's fading out all the way to the back. Right, so that's not going to help us because we're going to end up with 100% displacement here, and then 100% all the way down, tapering off down to 0% there. So not going to work. Now what we want to do is we want to create a very, very fine little bit of separation. You can do this with a really, really tiny edge bevel, or rather just polygon bevel, and that will be at 100. Let's invert everything else. Select this, Shift W to get our weight map tool. We'll go down to 0% and click, and oops, looks like we left this face. The edges was still selected, so they were part of the polygons that were adjacent. So let's go ahead and click there. All right, so now you can see we've got 100% just on the front face, and then it's tapering off to 0% right there. And if you look really close, you can see the fade out. Now, the tighter you make this, the quicker you're going to have the tapering off of your displacement. The looser you make it, the more you're going to have kind of a blend fade out. And depending on what you need for whatever your circumstances are, you can choose the one that's right for you. So let's go ahead and hop back over here to the render tab. And I'm going to select all this, press M, and I'm going to give this the cube material again. And now before I even do anything, I'm going to go ahead and add another layer, and I'm going to go down to processing and add a weight map texture. And since I already had that weight map selected, it will make that my weight map. And I have two ways of doing this. I can either, if I just turn this on right now, it's just going to make my weight map texture my diffuse color, and that's not what I want. So I can either change it to displacement and then set the blend mode to multiply, or I could just take this and drag it right onto here, and then it will make it a layer mask. All right, so now I can just turn this on, and as soon as the displacement gets caught up there, we'll see that we have displacement along the front, and then it gives a pretty close approximation to just going straight out along there. Okay, so this is kind of giving us more in line with what we're after. Now, keep in mind that if you have anything where you can hide the edges of a displacement, that can work totally fine. So, if I were to, for example, let's go ahead and just start a new scene here, and I'm going to go over to the model tab. I'm going to create a cube, and I'm just going to select this part here, and I'm going to say this is like, some architectural feature on an exterior of a house where I would like to put, maybe I would like to put some stucco right here. All right, so I'm going to press M. We'll call this stucco. There we go. And let's go back over to the render tab, and we'll just go ahead and hit play. So if I wanted to put stucco on the stucco, let's go ahead and use stucco for the stucco on the stucco. Let's go to noise and stucco. All right, and you can see the stucco on there, and we're going to change this to displacement. I've got it on recent, so I can just get it there. And now we've got our stucco, and since this is inset, we're not ever going to notice the problem here. So if you wanted to, have stucco in the middle of wood, and you have wood on the edges, then you're not even going to notice this. So keep in mind that if you can hide the edges in any way, either by having these polygons just completely overlap some surrounding geometry and kind of cut behind them, or by just having something inset, then you're never really going to notice the problem. So none of this other stuff is really super necessary. So just a side note there, because that could be something that saves you a lot of time. But if you want to be able to have something like the architectural like fins, so here let's go ahead and hide this, and let's go back over to the model tab. And let's go ahead and add in another cube, except this one I'm going to make much, much thinner. So something like that. And thinner this way. And then let's make it taller, so it'll be something nice and tall here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing that I had done before here. So just select this, bevel, and I'm just going to bevel in a tiny, tiny bit here. Yeah. Something like that ought to be fine. And like I said, it doesn't even matter how much. As long as it's something, you could go, you know, 1/10 of a millimeter. It's not going to matter. The closer you get it to the edge, the closer you're going to get this looking as if it's completely flat off of that face, which for something like architectural visualization is going to give you a nice look. So let's go ahead and drop that tool. And I'm going to select this. Let's go to lists. I'm going to make a new weight map. Again, I'll call it disp. And Shift W for my weight map tool and click, and then I can go ahead and just check just to make sure my vertex map, make sure that I've got that right. And what you want to see is this real fine taper, which we've got. So we can go back to default here and hop over to the render tab. And so now what I'm going to do is let's start this playing here. And I am going to create a new material on this entire group. And we'll call this fins. Okay. And I'm going to start just by adding, let's do something organic, and how about veins? It's pretty busy, but we're going to scale it up a lot, so it's not going to matter so much. So let's go to the texture locator and maybe give this 2 meters. Yeah, I think that looks good. And then I'm going to add another layer, processing, and let's put in another weight map texture. And I'm just going to drag this right onto the veins. That way I can take time and adjust this as needed. So, you know, maybe that's a little bit on the big side, so we'll go down to 1 meter. Yeah, something like that. And then once I have it the way I like it here, we can go ahead, right click, change this to displacement. And you can see this way it's fairly fine, and actually that veins probably is not going to be the best choice here. So let's go ahead and undo. And the nice thing about this is I can just right click here and choose change type, which is down off screen for you guys. Oops, let me move this out of the way. So I'm going to right click here, change type, and this, like I said, is totally off screen. I'm going to go with something much simpler. Actually, let's just use a basic noise. Yeah, so something like that I think works pretty well. The only thing is I think it has a little bit, it's a little bit faded looking, so let's go ahead and go to the texture layers. I'm going to increase the gain just a little bit. And I'm going to turn the frequencies down to 2, so it's a little bit simpler. There we go. So now let's go ahead and change that again to displacement. And now it's just going to be a question of getting the distance right. So let's take this material layer, and I'm going to set my displacement distance maybe to 0.25. There we go. I think something like that works pretty well. And now the cool thing about this is since we have this single pattern running across here, we can now duplicate these pretty easily. Now you could also use an image map and just do a front projection of the image map onto your geometry, and that will work fine as well. But if you want to do it procedurally, this will work pretty easily. So all I have to do is take this. Let's go to duplicate and clone tool, and let's just make a whole bunch of clones here. That ought to do. And then I'll center that up. Something like that. And we'll hop back over to the render tab, go to our camera view here, and we'll look at this from the edge, and we'll turn on our rendering again. And this should now give us pretty much what we're looking for. And you know, this is going to go from one piece to the next. So if I take these and scale them down, and let's set our action center to the origin. Now, if I scale these down, since I'm scaling in a component mode, in this case, I'm scaling in polygons. And actually, hold on, I'm going to want to pause my render here because it's going to slow me down a bunch to try and render this and scale at the same time. So we'll pause that. And now we'll just scale this down. So now as these are getting closer together, it's going to mean that there's less separation, not only between the fins, but less separation between the pattern. So let's scale those down like that. And now I'm going to drop the scale tool, and I'm going to set this back to a local action center. So I can scale up the fins individually. to kind of make them a little bit wider. And then let's go ahead and unpause this. And now we'll see we have a little bit more continuous look at there. So like I said, you could easily map an image on here and just put a UV map on the front, and that would work as well. But since we have that weight map causing some nice fade between the displaced front and the non-displaced sides, we won't have any kind of weirdness where the displacement is breaking the geometry or anything like that. And another nice thing is that we're just dealing with basic polygons for the areas that are not displaced, which is going to keep our scene just a little bit lighter. So you could always add something like some rounded edges on there or something to give this a little bit more of a realistic feel, less computer generated. But that ought to do it. So there you go. That's using displacements, and hopefully that will give you some good ideas as to how you can apply displacements in a few more different areas of your modeling. Now remember that as you do this, you can then have your displacements be separated from other things, but just remember that it's that initial facing angle of the polygons being displaced is what causes a lot of the initial problems with displacement. That's what gives us a problem when we displace on a cube, because all of the sides are just displacing outward from each other. That's why when we displace just the front on a sub-D model, we get the rounding that causes it to flare out on the sides. But if we can find a way to separate one surface from the rest of the surfaces without breaking the plane that those polygons that you want to displace are sitting on, then it will give us a much cleaner displacement and allow you a lot more flexibility with this. And that way you can go and you can easily change this. You could even animate this. So I could even set up and change the texture locator for my noise and move it, say left to right, and we're going to get the effect that these are actually moving. So there you go. Using displacements, using weight maps, and lots of other fun things to make your modeling jobs a little bit easier. If you like content like this, you can see more of it by subscribing on Patreon. You can find me at patreon.com/Ellery, or if you'd like the content to this episode or any other episodes, you can get that on Gumroad in an a la carte method, or you can buy them in groups there as well at gumroad.com/Ellery. Thanks for watching. Now go make something cool, and I'll see you in the next one.